The horizon is no longer empty. A heavy mist clings to the water, hiding the jagged silhouettes of ships that should not be there. For the people living along the banks of the Seine, the sound of the tide has changed. It is no longer the rhythmic pulse of nature, but the rhythmic beat of oars against the current. The gates of the city are barred, yet the air feels thin, as if the very walls are exhaling in terror. This is not a temporary storm. It is the arrival of a force that does not seek to merely take wealth, but to rewrite the map of the world. At the center of this gathering darkness stands a figure whose name is whispered with a mixture of awe and absolute dread. Rollo. The Frankish Empire, once the jewel of the West under Charlemagne, is fracturing. It is a house divided against itself, brittle and gasping for breath. To the north, the sea is no longer a barrier. It is a highway for those who have mastered the waves. The people of the north are often portrayed as chaotic forces of nature, but the reality emerging from the fog is far more calculated. They are not just raiding for gold, they are looking for a foothold. The conflict is not just between blades and shields, but between two fundamentally different ways of existing. One side clings to the fading glory of an ancient empire, while the other is driven by a hunger that cannot be satisfied by temporary plunder. Rollo is a man of immense physical presence, yet his true power lies in his ability to perceive the shifting winds of history. He has seen the coastal villages fall. He has watched the smoke rise from the abbeys. But he also understands that a life of constant movement is a life without a foundation. He is tired of the spray of the salt sea and the constant gamble of the raid. He looks at the rich, green valleys of France and sees more than a target. He sees a home. The tension in the air is thick because the Frankish king, Charles the Simple, faces an impossible choice. He can continue to fight a shadow that disappears back into the ocean every time his armies arrive. Or he can invite the shadow to sit at his table. This is the moment where the hunter becomes the guardian and the intruder becomes the architect. The year is 9/11, and the atmosphere at Saint-Clair-sur-Epte is heavy with the weight of what is about to happen. The riverbank is lined with soldiers from both sides, eyes locked in mutual suspicion. Every movement is scrutinized. Every hand rests near a hilt. The air smells of damp earth and the metallic tang of armor. On one side, the refined, weary nobility of France, draped in silks and heavy wools, their faces pale with the memory of the siege of Paris. On the other, the rugged, salt-stained men of the north, whose skin is mapped with the scars of 1,000 voyages. The gap between them seems insurmountable. How does a society built on law and divine right reconcile with a culture built on the strength of the individual and the harsh reality of the sea? King Charles understands that his kingdom is bleeding. The constant pressure from these maritime challengers has drained the treasury and exhausted the spirit of his people. He needs a buffer. He needs a wall that can fight back against the other waves of raiders still waiting in the cold northern mists. His proposal is radical. Some might even call it a surrender wrapped in the robes of diplomacy. He offers Rollo a vast territory in the north of France, the land around the mouth of the Seine. In exchange, Rollo must do the unthinkable. He must abandon his gods, embrace the faith of the Franks, and pledge his loyalty to the crown. It is a deal written in blood and desperation. The negotiations are not a simple exchange of words. They are a dance on the edge of a precipice. For Rollo's followers, this feels like a betrayal of their heritage. To bow to a foreign king is to lose the very essence of what made them feared. They mutter in the background, their hands tightening on their axe handles. But Rollo looks beyond the immediate horizon. He sees a land where his people can grow roots, where their children will not have to survive on the whims of the ocean. He sees the potential to build something that lasts longer than a human life. He is not just looking for land, he is looking for a legacy. He is willing to trade his gods for a kingdom. One of the most famous moments of this encounter illustrates the volatile nature of this transition. As part of the ceremony of fealty, it is expected that the vassal kiss the foot of the sovereign. It is a gesture of absolute submission, a physical manifestation of the hierarchy that holds the Frankish world together. Rollo, a man who has never bowed to anyone, refuses to perform the act himself. He looks at the king's foot with a mixture of contempt and disbelief. The tension spikes. The Frankish court holds its breath. A single wrong move could turn this diplomatic bridge into a battlefield. Rollo beckons one of his men to perform the task. The warrior, mirroring the defiance of his leader, does not kneel. Instead, he reaches down, grabs the king's foot, and lifts it to his own mouth while remaining perfectly upright. The sudden movement causes the monarch to lose his balance and tumble backward off his throne. The Frankish knights reach for their swords, their faces turning a shade of crimson that matches the royal carpets. The air crackles with the sound of steel sliding against leather. But then, a sound breaks the silence. Not a battle cry, but a guttural, mocking laughter from the Viking line. In that moment of near absurdity, a profound truth is revealed. The Vikings are not entering the Frankish world to be absorbed by it. They are entering to transform it. They will take the titles, they will take the land, and they will even take the faith. But they will never truly be tamed. The land they are given will come to be known as Normandy, the land of the Northmen. It is a territory born of conflict, a frontier where two cultures collide and begin to fuse into something entirely new. But the peace is fragile. In the early days, the shadows are long. Rollo must walk a fine line between his new identity as a duke and his old identity as a warlord. He must convince his men that their future lies in the plow and the stone wall, not just the dragon ship. To do this, he employs a brand of justice that is as cold and unforgiving as the northern winter. The transformation of Rollo from a maritime marauder to a duke of the realm is one of the most significant shifts in European history. It is a process of deep internal and external change. Rollo, now known by his baptized name Robert, must enforce the very laws he once ignored. He must protect the churches he once targeted. He becomes the shield of the kingdom, a fierce defender of the borders. This is not just a change of title, it is a change of identity. The wolf is now guarding the sheep, and he is doing so with a terrifying efficiency. He knows how the raiders think because he was their master. He knows where they will strike because he drew the maps. As the years pass, the change deepens. The followers of Rollo begin to marry into the local Frankish families. The harsh, guttural sounds of the north begin to blend with the evolving Romance languages of the region. The culture that emerges is not purely Viking, nor is it purely Frankish. It is Norman. This new identity is characterized by a restless energy and a genius for organization. They take the feudal structures of the Franks and refine them, turning them into a system of control that is more efficient than anything seen since the height of Rome. They are the ultimate hybrids, possessing the tactical ferocity of the Norse and the administrative patience of the Franks. But the dark thriller element of this story lies in the psychological weight of this transition. Imagine the internal struggle of a generation caught between two worlds. The older warriors still remember the smell of the salt air and the freedom of the open sea. They whisper the old names of the gods, Odin, Thor, Freya, in the dark, even as they attend Mass in the morning and kneel before the crucifix. There is a haunting silence in their camps at night, a lingering question of whether they have traded their souls for a patch of earth. Their children, however, are being raised as French nobles. They speak the local tongue, they wear the heavy silks, and they study the nuances of courtly life. The shift is not just political, it is a slow-motion erasure of a former self. The sea is being forgotten, replaced by the soil. Rollo's governance is marked by a strict adherence to justice that borders on the mythical. The stories told of his reign emphasize a zero-tolerance policy for disorder. It is said that he could hang a gold ring from a tree in the forest, and it would remain there, untouched, for years. The fear of his law was greater than the temptation of the gold. This is the irony of the Norman arrival. The men who came to disrupt order became the most fervent enforcers of it. They recognized that for their new society to thrive, they needed stability more than they needed plunder. A thief in Rollo's land did not just face a judge. He faced a man who had mastered the art of the kill. The shadows of the past do not disappear easily. There is always a lingering doubt in the halls of the Frankish court. Can these people truly be trusted? Is this peace merely a pause in the struggle? The Normans are viewed with a mixture of respect and lingering prejudice. They are the other who have moved into the neighborhood. Yet they prove their worth time and again. They are the most formidable warriors in the land, and their presence ensures that the mouth of the Seine is no longer an open door for invaders. They have effectively closed the gate behind them, locking the rest of their kin out in the cold. This shift would eventually lead the descendants of Rollo to look beyond the borders of Normandy. The same restless spirit that brought their ancestors across the sea would drive them to Italy, to Sicily, and most famously, across the English Channel in 1066. The Normans became the elite of Europe, a class of warrior aristocrats who seemed to have a divine mandate for conquest and administration. They built cathedrals that reached for the heavens and castles that anchored them to the earth. They were a people of stone and iron, born from the marriage of salt and silk. The legacy of Rollo is a testament to the power of adaptation. It is a story about the danger of a crumbling system and the opportunity that arises from chaos. The Frankish Empire could not hold its ground, so it had to invite the enemy in. In doing so, it created the very force that would eventually dominate the medieval world. The Normans were not just a product of their environment, they were the masters of it. They took the best of both worlds, the maritime mobility and ferocity of the north, and the legal and religious structures of the south. They were the bridge that carried the energy of the Viking Age into the heart of the Middle Ages. As we look back at the dark corridors of the 10th century, we see that the line between a villain and a hero is often just a matter of time and perspective. To the monks of the 9th century, Rollo was a nightmare incarnate, a shadow that brought nothing but destruction and the smell of burning parchment. To the people of Normandy in the 11th century, he was the founding father, the source of their legitimacy and their pride. The journey from pirate to noble is a trek through a landscape of shifting loyalties and brutal pragmatism. It is a story of how the predator becomes the protector and how the blood on the blade is wiped away to sign a treaty. The conflict that defined the beginning of this era did not end with a decisive battle. It ended with a quiet signature and a symbolic gesture. It ended when the two sides realized that their survival depended on their ability to integrate. The Seine still flows. The mists still rise. But the ships that navigate those waters today carry the genetic and cultural echoes of that ancient collision. The danger of the past became the foundation of the future. The very men who arrived to burn the city ended up building its most enduring walls. The story of the Normans is a reminder that history is not a series of isolated events. It is a continuous flow, a constant state of becoming. The dark thriller of the Viking Age did not conclude with a fade to black. It transitioned into a new chapter, one where the shadows took on the form of stone walls and stained glass. The Rise of Rollo is the ultimate example of how power changes shape, but never truly disappears. It simply finds a new vessel, a new title, and a new way to rule. The ambition that once drove a longship now drives the construction of an empire. In the end, the integration of the Northmen into the Frankish realm was perhaps the most successful infiltration in history. They did not destroy the system they entered, they perfected it. They did not lose their identity, they upgraded it. And as the centuries unfolded, the world would learn that while you might be able to give a Viking a crown and a title, you can never quite take the spirit of the sea out of his soul. The restless ambition that drove them to the shores of France would eventually change the course of human history forever. From the courts of London to the sun-wrenched hills of Sicily. The mist on the Seine may hide many things, but it cannot hide the truth of what happened there. A kingdom was saved, a duchy was born, and a group of outsiders became the ultimate insiders. The tension of those early days, the fear of the unknown, and the gamble of a desperate king created a legacy that still resonates in the languages we speak, the laws we follow, and the very structure of the modern world. It is a story of conflict, survival, and the dark, relentless drive to grow. The shadow on the horizon did not bring the end of the world. It brought the beginning of a new one. The transition was never easy. It was marked by internal rebellions and the constant threat of being pulled back into the old ways. There were those among the Normans who felt the call of the North too strongly, and those among the Franks who could never accept these newcomers as equals. But the momentum of history was on the side of the Normans. Their ability to blend their ancestral toughness with their newfound political savvy made them an unstoppable force. They were the bridge between the ancient world of tribal warriors and the medieval world of organized states. A bridge built on the bones of the old world. As the sun sets over the cliffs of Normandy today, the echoes of that transformation are still there. They are in the names of the towns, the architecture of the churches, and the very DNA of the people. The story of Rollo is a dark thriller because it deals with the most fundamental human fears and aspirations. The fear of being replaced and the aspiration to become something greater. It is a reminder that the greatest changes often come from the most unlikely places, and that the most dangerous enemies can become the most vital allies if the stakes are high enough. The growth of the Normans serves as a blueprint for cultural survival. It shows that the key to longevity is not rigid resistance, but fluid adaptation. By the time the direct line of Rollo reached William the Conqueror, the work was complete. The pirates were now the masters of European diplomacy and warfare. They had moved from the periphery of the world to its very center, not by force alone, but by the strategic brilliance of their leaders. They understood that to hold the land, you must become the land. The dark clouds that once gathered over the Seine eventually cleared, revealing a landscape that had been permanently altered. The dragon ships were gone, replaced by merchant vessels and the ships of a new kind of navy. The rough encampments had become thriving cities. The move from the chaos of the Viking Age to the stability of the Norman era was one of the most profound shifts in history. It was a journey from the edge of the world into the heart of power. A journey that began with a single man who decided that his future was not on the water, but on the land he had come to conquer. The evolution was total, and the world would never be the same. The wolf had found his home, and he would never let it go.